Sota Daf Memchet Amud Aleph and Amud Bet, the value of equanimity. Psku Anshei Amana. Equanimity is a wonderful quality, to be able to be calm and relaxed no matter what's going on around us. And it's something that we're required to strive for and to achieve in the way that we live. And essentially, it's being able to exclude worry from our lives. And we know that worry is one of these things that doesn't do a whole lot of good. Most of what we worry about doesn't actually happen. Things usually work out differently from the way we worry they might. And a lot of our worry is just a waste of energy. But nevertheless, we get worried. And equanimity is the essence of bitachon, of having such security in our relationship to Hashem that we can relax. We're not worried, particularly about the future, because worry is usually about the future. And it links into the midah of sameach b'chelko. And sameach b'chelko doesn't just mean I'm satisfied with what I've got, even though I've got very little. It doesn't imply a life of deprivation. Sameach b'chelko means enjoying my life so much, my focus is so much on what I enjoy and what I get out of my life, that I don't focus on what I don't have. It's a matter of directing our pleasure rather than excluding pleasure. So Samach doesn't mean just be happy with what you've got and who cares if it's rough. It's being so happy with what we've got that we don't notice so much what we don't have. In understanding the piece of Gemara that we have before us, we're going to use a piece of Keren Orah. Keren Orah was a Talmud of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, so this is right at the core of our Lithuanian canon. In terms of the Lithuanian approach to learning, there were many Polish Gedolei Yisrael and others that are also part of the Lithuanian canon, and the Keren Orah certainly is one of them. The Keren Orah is usually very analytical in his treatment of the Gemara. When we get to Kodshim, to the section of the Talmud that deals with the Beis HaMikdash and with the service in the Beis HaMikdash, we'll use the Keren Orah a lot more. But in this particular piece, he becomes very poetic, and he gets into a drush that is rather important. So the Mishnah says, "Mishicharaf Beit HaMikdash batel hashamir v'nofet tzufim v'fasku Anshei Amana Yisrael." There were three changes in the quality of life after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And the Marshal says we're talking about the second Beis HaMikdash. Not everybody, some people, learners, will see that it's the first Beis HaMikdash, but the three things we noticed. There was no longer a shamir. Shamir is that little worm that was able to either carve out the words on the gemstones of the Choshen, or was used to cut the bricks, the stones from which the Beis HaMikdash was built. V'nofet tzufim, which is a strange comment, it's a kind of a very sweet honey. Ufasku Anshei Amana Yisrael, and Baalei Emuna, people who really had faith, ceased to exist. We didn't have those people. Shneimar, and the Mishnah brings a posuk, Hoshia Hashem ki gamar chasid, save us Hashem, because there are no longer any chasidim, ki fasu emunim b'bnei adam, because there has been a hefsek, there's been a stoppage in people who really have emunah among human beings. So obviously there are people who have emunah, but that level of emunah we don't have. What is that level of emunah? It says the Gemara at the bottom of Amud Beis, "V'nsku Anshei Amana, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Elu b'nei Adam shehin ma'aminim ba'Kadosh Baruch Hu." That's people who really believe in the Rebbeinu Shalom. So it's quite interesting. If I were to say to you, or somebody were to say to me, "Do you believe in God?" Our answer would instantly be, "Yes, of course." But here we're told that from the time of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, there are not that many people who believe in God. So what does that mean? What is a ma'aminim b'Kadosh Baruch Hu? The Tanya, Rabbi Elazar HaGadol said, "Kol mi sheyesh lo pat besalo v'omer ma'ochal lemachar eino ela miktanei amana." If you've got enough for today and you're worried about tomorrow, then you're ktanei amana. Then when people ask, "Do you believe in God?" you've got to say, "A little bit. I have a little bit of faith in God." Because if I really had faith in God, I would have no worry at all. And it's something that should be quite logical, because if we look at our lives and you go back and you see how much of what we worried about didn't come about, particularly when it comes to matters of parnasa. Steve, you and I were talking about the other night. How many times have you worried? What will I have parnasa from? When I go to Israel, when this happens, when that happens, what will happen with my parnasa? And we worry. And what did you tell me, Steve? There hasn't been a day since you came out of yeshiva that you haven't had a parnasa, not one day. And with many of us, that's true, bli ayin hara, that with the help of Hashem, that the fact is we manage, it's there. But we worry. So if we worry, and we don't realize, the fact is the things we used to worry about all worked out. So what's all the worry about? The worry is about it's a state of lack of emunah. So when somebody asks, "Do you believe in God?" the right answer is, A little bit. Well, just a little bit, because there are not many people today who believe in God a lot, because since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we don't have that, and we'll see why. Rashi says, Anshei Amana botchim b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'somchim alav la'asot tov ve'en do'agim l'chisaron. That's the definition of emuna. When somebody says, do you believe in God, that's not a theological question. That's an emotional question. Do you suffer from worry? That's what do you believe in God means. If somebody says, do you believe in God? Translate that as, do you suffer from worry? If the answer is yes, I do, to some degree, then I believe in God, only to some degree. Really important piece of Gemara and Rashi in understanding the nature of bitochen and the nature of worry. And then further on in the Gemara, Shema'aminim b'Kadosh Baruch Hu levater mimamonam lenoi hidur mitzvah. This is people who are willing to spend extra money on making a mitzvah beautiful, on going a little bit further than the minimum requirements of a mitzvah. V'litzedakah, and to give more tzedakah than the minimum that they're required to do. V'lotzat shabbatot v'yamim tovim, and to spend on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And not worry, can I afford it, can I afford it, can I afford it? This constant worry about can I afford it when it comes to mitzvot is k'tanei amana. That shows that our level of emunah is somewhat lacking. That's what it is. And the Brisker Rov says from here, for example, therefore, if one doesn't give enough to mitzvot and to tzedakah, it's not just that one isn't doing tzedakah properly, that one isn't fulfilling the mitzvah of tzedakah or the mitzvah of hidur mitzvah. It's an indication of an insufficient emunah. That's what is really going on in that issue. And then comes the Keren Orah. Now, what the Keren Orah, I think, is concerned about is this phrase nofet tzufim, which we get very infrequently. The sweet honey. What's that got to do with it? The shamir worm, I understand, that was a miracle. And we know that a lot of miracles didn't take place after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, even if the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. I understand Pasku Amana, but what's this honey? And where does that fit in? The only time that we've got reference to it that comes to mind is on the Shabbos Psikei de Zimra. Mishpetei Hashem emet tzadku yardav. We say the laws of the Torah that we study every day are true, and they are integrated in an integrated system. Hanechimadim mizahav u'mipaz rav. They are more endearing to us than money and treasure. Umetukim midvash v'nofes tzufim. And they are more sweet than honey and this nofet tzufim, this kind of baked sweet dish made with a very sweet honey. So it's that the Keren Orah works on. And he says on this Mishnah, Ze ne'emar al churban sheni. We're talking about the second destruction. V'yadua ki or mikdash sheni lo higia lema'alat or mikdash rishon. The energy that emanated from the second temple doesn't get to the level of the energy that came from the first temple. It's interesting. I think I mentioned I was taking a client to Yerushalayim, a non-Jewish client who'd never been to Israel before, and he had an amazing experience at the Har HaBayit. He went to the Har HaBayit because he could, and he experienced a level of energy. He literally experienced energy there that moved him and shook him and that stayed with him for a long time afterwards. Everything the guides explained was all about Mikdash Sheni. They talked there about Herod's time, and that's where we've got the archaeological stuff from. So a lot of the discussion around when you go around Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash area is about the second temple. So he asked me, how did the second temple compare to the first temple? That was his question. Was the level of energy comparable? And I explained to him, no, the level of energy was not comparable. It's interesting, that was just a few days ago, and today we find the Keren Orah explaining what that is. We know back from Yuma Daf Chof Aleph that there were 5 things that were missing in the second temple. Lirmoz al bechinat hei ila'a alma decheru kinistera. To teach the idea of these 5 things that are missing in Yuma. So if you want to be very, very smart, when you go to your Gemara and on Yuma Chof Aleph, reference the Keren Orah on Sota Daf Memches. And then one day when your heirs open your Gemara and they see on Yuma Daf Chof Aleph that, wow, you linked it together with the Keren Orah on Sota Daf Memches, they'll think you're an amazing Goen and Ilui. So just, we see how they think, how they make these linkages. 5 things were missing to hint to the hay that was missing. So we get into a bit of Kabbalah there. Yud K, Vov K, the 2 hays in Hashem's name are a source of enormous energy. There's the first hay and the second hay, and the first hay was missing. The energy from the first hay was missing in the second Beis HaMikdash, and that was a time what was missing? Alma decheru. The first Beis HaMikdash was a world in which energy was limitless. There was an unlimitless force and power that was coming from the Beis HaMikdash. Kinistera. During the second temple, that was hidden, and all they could access was the energy of the second hay, a much lower level of energy. And that's all they had during the second temple. And even this level of light was enough to take away the heaviness of the heart, the stone in the heart, because there was energy coming from the Beis HaMikdash. Even if you weren't standing at the Beis HaMikdash, there was energy coming from the Beis HaMikdash. The actions, the mitzvahs, the Torah they were learning were all done with the force of this particular energy. וגם טעמו מתיקות ונעימות התורה והמצווה על ידי אור היוצא מן המקדש להאיר בלב כל ישראל. This is a very important sentence. And they were able to taste, this word taste, to get the ta'am. They could get the ta'am of the Torah and the mitzvah. It tasted delicious. And that taste in their fulfillment of the Torah, of the mitzvahs, and their learning of Torah came from that hay, the one hay in the first Beis HaMikdash, the two hays in the second Beis HaMikdash, the two hays in the first Beis HaMikdash. That power that came from the hay, that light and energy that came from the hay, gave them a sense of joy and mitikut, of sweetness and taste in the mitzvahs they were doing. You can't just access it direct. The force, the energy from the Beis HaMikdash is infused into the Torah mitzvahs, which we can then access. In the Torah mitzvahs, we can actually access that sweetness and energy that comes from the Beis HaMikdash, the two hays in Hashem's name, that come from Hashem through the Beis HaMikdash into the Torah and mitzvahs, and the people can access it that way. That's part of what the Beis HaMikdash gives us and what we cry for when we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. And because they were able to taste the sweetness of Torah mitzvahs, gavar shoresh ha'emunah belibam. That builds emunah. Listen to this. Emunah is not something abstract. Emunah is an outcome of the sweetness of Torah. If you find enough energy and sweetness in the Torah that you're learning and keeping, then the emunah flows. Then you don't want to waste time doing anything else. You just want to access that energy. And you'll put in extra money to do a mitzvah because the mitzvahs are so amazing. It's like paying a little bit extra for an upgrade in the hotel. They give you a nice room in the hotel and they tell you for a little bit of extra you can have an upgrade, a hidur mitzvah. You say, okay, for another few dollars I can have a magnificent suite. Of course you'll do it. But with mitzvahs we don't do that. With mitzvahs we hold back. Well, they didn't hold back when they were able to access that sweetness. It was so delicious. It was like that 5-star hotel. Of course, you put a little bit extra in. To know, there's not by investing in a mitzvah, you're not going to have less. You're going to have more. There's no question about that. And you're not going to get more because you're mean-spirited. Because you try a little harder in your work. And all that was lost. Once that joy of learning was lost, then you try and make it up with other things. Once that sweetness is no longer there, you want to fill the vacuum. You're unfulfilled. You're unsatisfied. That luxury that you felt from the mitzvahs and from Torah, that sense of luxury, of depth, of beauty, of exhilaration, that's all of a sudden gone. Now there's a vacuum. So you want to fill the vacuum. So we fill the vacuum with whatever we can access. And we pursue the bitter things, assuming they're sweet. We like money, we like comfort, because these things satisfy that craving. And that's why we don't have Baalei Amana anymore, because they don't have access to that sweetness which enables them to focus all their energy on what they have, not on what they don't have, because what they have is so amazing. But now what we have is not that amazing. So we need more than just what we have. And so he goes on and works through the whole thing about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, that once you come to seek the pleasure from limited things, from material things, then whatever you've got is at my expense, and now you get sinat chinam, you get competitiveness, you get hatred, you get all the things that brought to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And then at the end, v'yesh od chelek echad dugmat dvash hamuvchar hu sod haTorah. And there's another area where this sweetness of Torah is accessible, is through the sword, to understand the hidden meaning. to go into a sugya, into a piece of Gemara, and to be able to get the pshat very clearly. And he goes through that. He actually analyzes the process of learning based on this Gemara, how you've got to first clarify, and you've got to sift the flour, and you've got to get the ingredients all very clear. And that's kind of fairly boring work, but that's the first work. And then you put it together, and then you bake it. And then it comes into this delicious loaf of bread that you can really enjoy. You need to put the effort into the ingredients of the learning and the integration of the ingredients and the baking, the preparation of it all to come out with this beautiful nofet sufim, this beautiful sweet-tasting product that allows us to enjoy it so much. And then through that enjoyment, we're able to place less value on others. And that's the meaning of a value. What does a value mean? A value means, what do you value? So if you place a great deal of value on one thing, you're automatically placing less value on something else, because values, there's prioritization. That's what value means. This is more important than that. That's what a value is. If everything is equally important, then there's no value. Value is when you have to trade off. I'm willing to pay money for this because that's more valuable to me. And that's how we deal. That's how we do business. That's how we live our lives. We pay a price for something that's more valuable to us than the price we're paying. And so when we talk about sameach bechelko and bitachon as a value, that the way we get to that is by realizing it's more valuable than something else. That we're able to find such value in our Torah or mitzvot that the rest of it is a waste of time. That's how we have to get to see it. Now, since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we're incredibly disadvantaged. So in a sense, from this piece of Gemara, there's comfort. It's not just, oh, terrible thing. Now if somebody asks you if you believe in God, you've got to answer somewhat, a little bit. It's dishonest to say yes, because those are the Baalei Amana. Those are the people who really believed in God. We believe in God a little bit, somewhat. So you would think that's a terrible thing, that there are no Baalei Amana, but there's a comfort in it as well. Because as we learn it with the Keren Or, Hashem is saying, I don't expect you to have that level of emunah. I expect you to want the Beis HaMikdash to be rebuilt. So that when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, when you say the tefillot in the Shemona Esrei in a few minutes' time, or when we have a Shiva Osa B'Tammuz or a Tisha B'Av, don't just think of this abstract thing, the Beis HaMikdash, and when it's rebuilt, there'll be avodah. How will it change your life? It will change your life that you will find such sweetness in Torah or mitzvahs that you won't want anything else. You won't value anything else compared to them. That's how it will change your life. It will remove worry from your life, because you won't be concerned. There'll be such a level of emunah that you won't have any kind of a level of worry. That's what to be worried about. That's what to be thinking about when you realize what the absence of the Beis HaMikdash does to me. That Hashem doesn't even expect me to have a lot of faith, because I don't have access to the sweetness of Torah and mitzvot that I do have when the Beis HaMikdash is there, and I can access the energy of the Alma Dechiru, that I can get that world, that unlimited world of energy. Then I'm able to have a completely different level of emunah, and then Hashem expects of it, but at this point we're missing. And as he ends off in the end, that until the time when that's established, and we'll be able to lisboa misod tanchumea v'yitangu mizuv kvoda, to wait until once again the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, and we're able to draw from its energy and to find the sweetness and the beauty in everything that we do, and thereby to remove worry and da'aga, to become gedolei amana, some of the great people of faith, and not to worry about the future.